This week on Phantom Power Hour, the idea of how limiting yourself pushes creativity.
Sound bouncing around, and I think the other interesting part was, this seems wholesome, and I could be BSing this whole thing.
So hello again, Jeremy.
Hey, Josh.
Hey.
How you doing?
I feel like I haven't seen you in so long, like one day.
It's been 2 days.
Not 2 full days yet.
Oh, well, yeah, that's true.
You know,
a day and a half.
It's been 1 week since you looked at me.
It's a song reference.
It's a song reference. But this is the first one that we've gotten recorded since we had the Styx crew in here.
Since we've been to the Styx concert.
And you've been locked away in a room going through footage.
So much footage. There's so many more videos, too.
Yeah.
There's like 4 more, but I think I'm going to condense it down to 2 because that just seems like a lot.
It's a lot, but I mean, I don't know. It was such a cool day. So many good things to be seeing and learning about in there.
Were you ever into Styx?
I grew up listening to the hits. Styx wasn't a widely played group in my home growing up. Very much more a child of the Grateful Dead and Sublime and jam bandy type of things. But I knew the hits, and once I started teaching, there was a lot of, Styx tunes and other classic rock tunes that I had to learn so I could teach other kids how to play them and stuff. Huge appreciation for their writing style and kind of the unsung intricacies of their songs.
Yeah. My dad used to listen to them all the time when we were younger. And it was definitely one of those situations where I was like, oh, please don't make me listen to this again. So I think until I got a little bit older, I hated listening to it. But now going back and listening to some of those songs, this is good songwriting.
Yeah, really good songwriting. For me, it was more of I don't want to listen to this Allman Brothers album again. That's what I was getting burnt out on. Or there's a pretty niche Jerry Garcia album called Not Just for Kids. And so anytime there was a road trip or going to Kings Island or anything like that, that would be on repeat in the truck.
Kings Island, that's like the Midwest thing.
It really is. It is. It's the beach of the Midwest.
It is.
We went once a year, though, at least. But yeah, so Not Just for Kids was played out so much. But now I go back, and it's a comedy album, like a comedy, almost bluegrassy, all acoustic kind of thing. But I have a core memory burnt in my brain where there's this song of this back and forth between just a guy meeting a stranger. And it says, "Hey, stranger. Well, hello there, stranger. Does this road go all the way to Little Rock? Well, I've been sitting here all day and it ain't gone nowhere yet." And it's just like 3.5 minutes of that style of joke. And I think that's where I get my humor from, or lack of humor.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'll have to go and listen to that album now.
Yeah. It's fun. It's a fun little listen. Bears Picnic, The Picnic of Bears or something is another track on there.
See, this seems wholesome. The stuff we listen to is like the old Bob and Tom records that were not appropriate for kids to listen to.
Dear P.
Oh my gosh. All of them. And so many jokes I didn't get till I was older. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have listened to that.
No.
At any point. Not appropriate. I can't believe it was on the radio.
It really was, though.
Yeah.
Was Bob and Tom a Midwest thing, too? I didn't know how syndicated radio worked at that age. I just assumed these are just some guys in Indiana. But now that I'm older, I realize, no, I think it was a nationally...
Is it?
I don't know.
I don't know how local it is. Let us know in the comments below, or go. Do they exist on Spotify? Go listen to some of the Bob and Tom comedy songs.
There, you can for sure find the comedy song clips on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
There's a lot of them. Some better than others. All worth listening to.
Oh yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, I feel like Bob and Tom was like the Howard Stern of our parents' generation.
But Howard Stern was around.
Yeah.
They were the local
Yeah.
Howard Sterns.
Maybe, when you grow up in the sticks like I did, you don't have XM radio.
It didn't exist then. Come on. You're making excuses.
Making excuses. You're right. I should have searched out more Howard Stern. It's all on me. It's my fault. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Phantom Power Hour yet again. Normally we wait until the very end, but I feel like we should just do a quick interjection of, if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. You might like what you see. If you've missed out on some of the other videos, the last one was most of the tech team most of the tech team from Styx came in here and talked about kind of what they do on the road, how they get those big rock shows put together. And, as an audience member, it seems seamless and very calming and just a fun experience. But then when you're behind the stage, wow, is there a lot going on?
I'm blown away by how long they work. Like, we got there for that day, and that was like a relaxed day for them, because they were the only people playing that stage, so they got to like take it easy all day. But taking it easy is not what they were doing. They were already working when we got there early, and we were there for over 12 hours.
Yeah.
And it was work. I think they got to chill for like an hour when we went and got food.
Exactly. Well, you say food, but that's a very loose term for deep fried Oreos.
Yeah, that was not, I wouldn't recommend it.
I wouldn't call that food.
It's like watching a movie that you need to see, like Jaws. I have one friend that really enjoys that movie. I didn't enjoy that movie, but you got to watch it. It's like, I don't know.
You have to see it to understand the
That's what
cultural
a deep fried
references.
Oreo is like. It's like watching Jaws.
Yeah. No better. Man, my brain's not working yet.
You drink some energy.
I do need to drink some energy. I need ghosty ghost.
Hashtag sponsor us, please.
Hashtag not a sponsor. Could be. You could be.
I wouldn't mind.
I wouldn't either. Lord knows I go through a lot of it.
I like caffeine.
I started liking caffeine, and now I think I'm at that point where I just have to have it. Or my brain shuts down. My organs just turn off.
There was a point I was drinking way too much, and I have to I go every couple of weeks for at least a few days where I don't have some. I don't know if that's nearly enough to reset your caffeine sensitivity, but yeah, being a parent kind of forces you down that path a little bit.
Yeah, that's totally why I am so into caffeine as well. Children.
Well, dogs.
Yeah, well, no, I can't blame it on anything other
Everyone finds their own road to caffeine, my friend.
That's true. That's so true. I plan and think about like, oh yeah, I can kind of whittle down my caffeine intake at this point, and then it never happens. It just doesn't happen.
I do like if you slowly wean off of it, and then you go to the gym for workout, and then you like load with it, like get a big old thing of pre-workout, and then you're like, oh, I can do everything. Look how much weight I move.
So strong and energized.
I've never felt like more of a bro than just saying that just now. So what are we talking about today?
There's a handful of things that we can talk about. We could kind of touch on some of our biggest takeaways from either the sit down with the crew or that whole experience that day. Which, if you haven't watched it, I'll put a link to the videos that are at least currently out, and then you can go subscribe to Recording Studio Loser if you haven't already. Be on the lookout for, what'd you say, 4 more, maybe whittle down to 2 more.
There's at least 2 more, probably 3, but there's enough stuff for 4 if I can do it. But
and then potentially hit up your Patreon for more content.
Actually, there's some of your guys' stuff is going to be on the Patreon.
Oh,
That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
We did a session just doing ribbon mics with your band, Josh Powell, and I don't know, is it your band? Or is that the right thing to say?
Yeah. It's a band that I have been with, 7 years now, I think. 6 or 7 years. But yeah, so under the name Joshua Powell, but we're all co-contributors.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it used
We
to
view
be.
it all as our own little baby.
When did he drop the Great Train Robbery?
Right around the time that I joined.
Okay.
So when I originally got on as the bassist for them, it wasn't necessarily going to be or planned to be a long-term commitment for either of us.
Mm-hmm.
It was more of they needed a bass player. I had just serendipitously left kind of the standard corporate career route and decided to do music full time. So it just made sense to join and, play some music with them, just learn all of their previous recordings and go play shows. And I knew all the guys previously from college, but then, that kind of brotherhood just kept growing as we were on the road more and more. And when the pandemic hit, we were supposed to do a lot of touring, and it turned into writing sessions that were different than any of their previous writing sessions, where usually Joshua would write the vocals and all the parts, and then go in and get it recorded. And there would be some input from Jacob on drums or Adam on guitar, but from my understanding, before my time, it was maybe 90% or higher, just kind of ideas from Joshua and then recorded in the studio and mildly tweaked. And various, producers that he worked with at Farsi Records and other things like that. But to put a bow on it, when COVID hit, we just kept getting together because we didn't want to lose steam, and we wanted to kind of use our time as productively as we could. So we kind of entered a new era of writing everything together, co-writing all the riffs and the chords and just everything that goes into it, all the production and stuff. So all that to say is, yeah, I consider it my band, and we all have like this co-parenting of the Joshua Powell name.
It's pretty cool, and it's a unique sound while at the same time being like a very nostalgic sound. 'Cause I love the old heavy stuff. And I was like, we even talked about this during the session, but like saying something's metal means something different to whoever is hearing that word.
Yeah.
Depending how old you are, what type of stuff. Because I mean, I don't think there's any subset of music that has more subgenres built into it than metal.
Maybe jazz, but
Maybe, yeah, okay.
But even then, I don't know.
Like, yeah, but it's heavy, it's melodic, it switches gears a lot, which is so much fun. So I had you guys in to record with just basically an experiment, just using ribbon mics, which was an interesting limitation for that type of sound. But I think it worked really well.
Well, I think one of the comments that was made during that session a couple days ago was the idea of how limiting yourself pushes creativity. And I think that's what we saw specifically on the drum set, right? From my understanding, it's not the most common thing to use only ribbon mics for an entire drum kit.
For sure, especially in that genre.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I've definitely done it on jazz records where you're doing a very minimal setup, only using ribbons just because you want that hyper fast thing that a ribbon does. Yeah, like it feels like it's right on top of you when it happens. They're very intimate, and I don't know if maybe it's the way that it actually conducts electricity, because it operates differently than a condenser. I don't know that I'm fully qualified to say why, but they just have like a completely different feel to them, and they pick up in both directions. Like the inherent nature of most ribbons, besides one that we had here, like it's going to pick up from the front and the back, but hyper reject the sides, which makes it interesting to mic a drum kit. Just some things you can reject, like I could put mics on the toms and then reject that cymbal that was right there.
Which is exactly what you did, right? You put them kind of in between the toms and then the cymbals that were right above them.
But yeah, they're definitely not aggressive like a normal drum miking setup would be, especially on the kick. That was an experiment in patience, I think, but I like the sound we landed on because it feels very like early 2000s, not clicky kick drum, but like a massive
woofy
thing.
Yeah. Which as you were kind of doing surgery on the tone and moving the mic here and there, adding a little dampening to the kick drum head and all of
Mm-hmm.
that, it was firstly just wild to in real time experience the tonal, like the drastic tonal difference between nothing on this head, lean something a little bit on this head, lean a little bit more on that head, and it changes the sound so much, which is another thing that we might not have really experienced in the same way had we not had the limitations.
For sure. I probably just would have reached for a different mic.
Right. Yeah. And the other aspect of this, Jacob's kick drum doesn't have a sound hole
Right.
on it. So that changes how you mic things. And that's going to limit how much clickiness you get because there's not going to be the internal mic and all of that. But like you said, I really like kind of the unique, I don't know if unique's the right word, but definitely not the normal modern sound that you hear in something classified in that kind of heavier genre these days. I don't know, man. That's what we like to do. We've talked about this idea of writing music that the masses will like, not in a sellout kind of way, but in a, hey, what if we did something like this, or what if we pared something down here to make it feel more accessible? And that might be an awesome idea. That might be a really, really good idea. But at the same time, we want to just keep making music that we have fun playing, which is why the album we're working on now is heavier. We've on tour, we'll be listening to Slipknot and Gojira and Deftones and Lamb of God and
it comes through.
yeah, yeah. Well,
it comes through.
that's been a really fun aspect of co-writing these songs because if you put your player hat on and you're just sitting in your room on your own, just riffing, trying to come up with stuff, it's really hard to step outside of this box that you formed around yourself over the years of playing and listening unless you really make a concerted effort to try to find a new idea or emulate something else. But when you're with a group of 3 or 4 guys and you all are not trying to make a certain sound, it's much easier to kind of expand your horizons and see, oh, that's the kind of tone he's giving me. How can I add to that by just tweaking some things, not with an idea of where I'm trying to go, but just complementing what's going on around me. And so, I don't know. It's just really fun to explore that way.
Makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't have a response for it. But I'm with you. I agree.
I concur. Maybe we can, if it's not too much of a hassle, get just a quick board bounce of the drums itself, and I can cut to an example of that as we're talking about just the ribbon mics on the kit. Well, technically dehydration.
It's not mixing up the way I want it to. Clumpy Protein.
Clumpy Protein.
It's my band's name.
That's a good band name.
No, it's not.
No. I was just trying to be supportive. So, kind of digging into that session a little bit more, we had the limitations or kind of the plan to only use those ribbon mics, which kind of changed the whole process of the songwriting and song recording side of things. But what am I trying to ask in relationship to the drums and using the ribbon mics? What's a more traditional use case for using some of the ribbon mics that we had in the drum set scenario?
Normally you see them on overheads, like in the form of Cole's 4038, I think is the model number. They kind of look like a circle with a handle that pops up like this. Like you see them in a lot of studios and they're really popular, but it's a different sound than the ones we had with us today. And we had AEA stuff. So R44 on kick, R88 on overheads, which I'm never mad about that thing on overheads. N22s on the toms, which I had never used before, but I really liked those mics.
They were thick.
Yeah, they sounded great on everything. Like you used one on your close bass cab, and we used it on guitar cab. It was fantastic everywhere. And then the KU5A, which is their front address ribbon, which we use for vocals, and we also put everywhere else just to see it. And we use it on snare, which it was great on snare. That was a really interesting snare sound, but it's basically like turning the thought process of miking a drum on its head, because instead of being super concerned with like, let me get the best sound out of this source, I was more thinking like, okay, what will play well in this position and also sound good because I know it's going to hear this. And then, so I'm like trying to approach it from like, yes, the mics are close and I want to get that impact and that presence, but I'm also trying to think about the holistic picture and everything working together. So it was rough for like it went pretty quick though. Like,
oh yeah,
but it was definitely because it was so minimal and because it was so limited. Like those small moves made a huge difference.
Exactly.
Trying to tame the kick drum because he didn't have a port, so naturally that thing's going to sustain like for days. So part of the thing was I have to kill the bass drum, and leaning a pillow up against it with a backpack, and then I like wedged it in there so hopefully when he hits it, like I get that low note to mature, but it's not boom. Because I mean that's the drawback you have not having a port. Like there's nothing to kill that resonance, which can be a really really good thing. Not something you typically see with a heavy player,
right?
But it's cool. An interesting limitation to work around.
yeah. All the ribbon mics on the bass cab was hilarious, and I want to come back to that. But so you said something pretty interesting of instead of thinking about how do I get the best sound out of the source and then replicating that with the microphones, it's more of how can I pair and position these specific microphones to get a type of sound that I want to use. So what type of experience do you draw upon to make those educated decisions? Because there's obviously, no matter what, you're going to have a portion of move it around, listen to it, move it around, listen to it. But obviously you had some educated understanding going into it.
Yeah.
And some idea of what you thought would give you the kind of sounds you wanted to work with.
At least with a couple of the mics. So 2 of the mics were mine, and the rest were loaners that we were getting to play with. And I have to send them back, and I'm heartbroken about, especially the N22s, because I want those. R44, the big honkin' ribbon, which I think is way back there. No way you guys can see that, but it's like if you think about the traditional like ribbon mic, if you see Elvis singing on something with a big mic, it's or Frank Sinatra, it's an R44 most of the time in that picture. Very old school. I think we remember it as like a vocal broadcast thing or the sounds of Kroners, like, but it's killer on like drum rooms or as a kick drum mic because it just has this thunderous low end. I mean, it's a massive ribbon. That mic weighs 15 pounds, maybe. Jeez. It's heavy. That's probably not 15 pounds, but it's a heavy microphone. But it's, and the weird thing with a ribbon, because it's your little tum-tums.
My little tum-tums are rumbling.
It can sound present really, really far away. So there was a balance with that mic in particular that I knew we were going to have, which is why I put a pop filter on it. Putting a pop filter on a mic in front of a kick, that seems weird.
I was curious watching you do that. Yeah.
But it was just to kind of protect the mic from the air blast of the kick. Because one, it could distort the ribbon material in there if it was getting too much air. So, and then placing it and pulling it back until we didn't get that distortion, and then kind of aiming it to where I get the most attack. So it was definitely a game of millimeters.
It really was. But it was fun just kind of seeing you move things around and just standing in the control room and hearing the drastic differences from some of the small changes that you made. Um, so, but when it comes to the mics that you hadn't used before, um, are you thinking about frequency response that you are assuming that they have? Is it pure experimentation?
Pure experimentation. I'm not really one. I mean, I may look at a mic and figure out generally what's happening, but I rarely look at a spec sheet unless something's wrong. Um, and with the rest of those, it basically came down to form factor for me. Like the N22s being as long as they were, like I knew I could kind of place him on the tom but be out of his way. And then the KU5A just seems like it was suited for snare. And it worked really well. Especially being front address, because I could get it in between the hi-hat and the snare. So the form factor worked to my favor there. And then I knew having the R88, it's either a killer room mic or killer overheads, and I didn't have overheads, so pop it on the overheads.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of like make one decision and then cascade from there, because I could have put the R44 on something else, but it's so large, it's not going to work on snare. There's no way to get it there.
Yeah.
And if it got hit, I would die.
Yeah, that'd be rough. That'd be rough.
So it had to live on either kick or mono overhead. But because of the amount of mics that we had, it kind of dictated that decision for me. So
yeah, that all makes sense. How did you decide to mic the bass cab with all the mics? All of them.
Well,
I've never seen.
Yeah.
It's like you rarely see a mic on a bass cab these days.
Right.
Let alone half a dozen.
Right, which is a crime. But yeah, so I knew I wanted a room sound, and I think initially we were going to put it in one of the ISO booths, and I was like, no, let's bring it in the room because we have all these mics. Why not? And the R88 and the R44 were super far away because I knew the R44 can pick up at a distance and still have like that low end maturity. And we put you in like the alcove back here, which is super dead. Like all those curtains way back there, there's 2 layers of Ruxel in each wall. So like there's no reflections in that alcove, but there is the further out you get. So the R88 pretty far back in the room, like you could get the vibe of standing in the room playing your cab, which you mentioned kind of felt like it.
It's the most that I've ever felt like that through a recording, standing in a different room.
Which is hard. I wanted to try to capture that, but it's hard to navigate it in a recording because it takes, just having that amount of information takes up so much space.
Yeah.
And we did that on every source.
Yes.
Like every guitar cab, every guitar take, all the bass, all the drums. Like it's a lot of competing frequencies, but I think I really like the way it sounds.
I have a follow-up question for that. So I'll get to that in a second. But hearing, even with the type of heavy compressed, heavy distorted tone that I was using for that track, it just felt like it could breathe, even though the source audio was compressed on my end, and then after it was all getting sent to the control room, you compress it even more in there.
Yeah, but
it's hard to fully describe it because I've mic cabs at home. I've used all the emulators and stuff, and I can get tones and sounds that I'm super happy with, but I don't know, standing in that room and you can't actually feel the air move, which is the big thing that everybody wants when you're recording a bass or guitar amp. Still feels like you can feel the air move, if that makes any sense at all. I know that if you haven't experienced it, so it makes no sense to you. But
I think there's validity to like capturing those first initial short reflections, like the thing that tricks your brain into thinking I'm in a room, because we've kind of trained ourselves over decades listening to records and that are just a 57, like super close to a speaker, which is a good sound. I mean, that's a sound that everybody knows. Like if you hear that, it's not off-putting in any way. But the thing that, like, I guess where your brain would start to put things in space, it's using those short reflections. And I could be BSing this whole thing, but how I interpret it, if I hear those short reflections, even if they're not crazy apparent, because I buried those room mics, but you still hear them in there. And with the R88 being like kind of in the middle of this room and like the sound bouncing around, and I think the other interesting part was I left the snares on some of the snares that are sitting out here. I turned a few of them off, but I wanted one of them on. So when you went for it, like it felt like you're playing live because you're going to rattle snares.
That's true. Yeah.
And I wanted to get that, which is, I mean, that's objectively like a no-no. If you're wanting to do things correct, like you probably don't want to leave the snares on, but I wanted to get that vibe.
Yeah, I think that falls under the category of like the imperfections, which is why it would be a no-no. But as we keep moving more and more forward in the modern age of recording technology and the emulation, vocal tuning, all the different aspects that you can use to get like the perfect audio, it seems like more and more people, it's almost like that uncanny valley when you see something that's almost human, but it's just not, like it's just off enough to where your brain is like, wait a second, what's going on here?
Yeah.
I feel like on the audio side, you can experience some of that with the, like getting rid of all of the natural nuances that happen.
And that's definitely a thing that's proliferated in our industry like crazy. Because I mean, the things that artists a lot of time want to go for is this like hyper surgical precision of execution on any given instrument, whether it's vocals, drums, or whatever, to the point where it can get boring, or it can pose other issues. Like now you're introducing artifacts because you're fixing it, and then those artifacts become a distraction. Where I would rather have like there was even a thing brought up like, hey, we want to be on the grid. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna line these drums up.
Right.
Why would I?
Yeah.
Like the groove sounds great. Like, which, and that's not a shot at him at all. That's a completely valid thing that people want to do a lot of times. And for some records, that's absolutely the right decision. But there is like a human aspect, and I feel like even people who are laymen and don't have a deep knowledge of music or musicianship, like they can recognize a good performance when they hear it, regardless of how it was recorded. Now, I think there's a Goldilocks spot. I have never experienced it, but I feel like there is, where you can have these like the perfect situation where you've put the perfect mic up that matches that person's voice. They're in the perfect room. You're going through the perfect preamp. Your levels are set perfectly, and they execute the performance perfectly. And all those things together, like what else could you possibly want?
Yeah.
But even in an instance like that, you could still go and tune it. Like you could tune it harder. You could make their modulation and the vocal even less and make it surgically perfect. And then despite all of that, a killer performance, killer gear, it's going to sound like trash because it doesn't sound human.
Yeah.
But then right back to, if that's what you want, if you want like a computer, then perfect.
Yeah.
You got it.
Hey, they can win Emmys or Grammys now. They can win Grammys. Keeping in mind the human aspect of a recording or a performance, when you are EQing things, right? Part of what you're doing is kind of changing the timbre a little bit, right? Because part of timbre is the frequency response of all the different spectrums that a given note is, like the harmonic structure of it, right? And you can minimize a lot of that through EQ if you're doing like really
narrow cuts.
Yeah, really narrow cuts and stuff. So have you, just in your days of mixing and stuff, have you come across experiences where you start to make a lot of these edits that seem like they on paper are the right moves, and then you start listening through and you're like, oh, this doesn't feel the way it should feel though, even though technically it's correct?
I don't know that it comes back to like being technically correct, because I don't know. That's a hard one. But yes, I have done things where it seems like I should do this thing, and then that's not at all the right answer for what needs to happen. And there's so much of it. Like they say, if you're gonna press a button, you need to press that button 10,000 times before you know exactly what that button does.
Yeah.
And it's so true. I think especially in the recording industry, and I was exactly this way. I would watch what people do and then repeat exactly what they do, not necessarily to like expect the same results, but like, okay, what's you tried to hold it.
I tried to hold it, man. I tried. You could see the pain on my face as I was trying to hold it back. There was, I'm so sorry to digress like this. I'll probably end up cutting all this, but there was, right when flights started back up during the era of COVID, I had a tickle in my throat because I had choked on my own spit, but I didn't want people around me in the airport to think that I was sick. And so I was holding it back, and it felt like an eternity. It was probably only like 2 minutes, but my eyes were watering, and like
You probably look sicker.
I probably looked, and it made me feel sicker. Like it, because my eyes were watering and I had a cough, my nose got real stuffy, and then I had like just saliva building. It was a bad time. It was not good. But yes, I tried to hold back that sneeze, and it did not work. I'm sorry. Go back to what you were saying.
What was I saying?
You looked at exactly what they did, and you kind of did the exact same thing.
I wasn't expecting like exactly the same output, obviously, but I kind of wanted to reverse engineer it. Like, okay, if I do exactly what you're doing to that kick drum to get that result, which I like, what does mine sound like? And so I'm kind of reverse engineering, like, what more do I need out of my kick drum from a raw standpoint to get to sound like that? I learned a lot doing that. So I think there's, on one hand, it's bad if you're just looking at what other people are doing and expecting some result. And I'm kind of deviating from the question, but it gets back to like, you think you should do these things and expect some result and it not be the thing. But I guess that's how I've come to those, like, these are the things that should happen, but just slowly building up a Rolodex of those and then going through them to be like, here's my expected intended results. And it all comes back to taste. Like, I have burned in my head, like, what I like a kick drum sound to sound like. And some people hate that sound.
Well, as long as you don't like snares that sound like Saint Anger, I don't think you'll have a lot of people mad at you. Although, honestly, I listened to a lot of Saint Anger in high school. Before it didn't bug me. The snare sound didn't bug me until I became more aware of those types of kind of tonal intricacies and the idea that you can have a bad snare sound. But when I was younger and more ignorant, like, I'm still pretty dang ignorant.
I mean, did it bother you?
No.
Then there you go.
Exactly. Like, I would listen to Sweet Amber on repeat, man.
There you go.
Yeah. We mentioned that we were going to talk more about our experience with the Styx crew, and I think I led us down multiple tangents there.
Could be another video.
Could be another video, so we gotta wait to hear more about that, I guess. Or go watch the whole podcast. There was a ton of really cool information in there. And then check out your videos for kind of the after the fact experience that we got. I'm excited to see the monitoring video, like the setup with the whole.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot. That was the part that I don't think I expected going into it. But looking back, I was like, oh, he knows what he's about to show us.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great.
So we had a whole episode on how we don't prefer in-ears, but I mean, in that context, with somebody who knows how to mix them, good Lord. I'd pick that every time.
Yeah.
Every time.
They gave us a wireless pack and some of their extra in-ears to wear during the performance, and it was eye-opening for sure. Yeah.
In a way that I didn't expect. Not that it sounded good, but we'll have to get into it in another video.
Yeah, we'll get into it in the next one, because there's a lot to get into with all that. But great experience and some cool videos. So, I guess since we were talking about the session that we just did a couple days ago, the same way that you were talking about the source audio from the drums in combination with trying to find the right mic and the right position and setup to get the sounds that you wanted, we experienced a little bit of that too on the vocal side. not necessarily by changing the vocal mics and things of that nature, but you have a vocal past. I don't. Have you ever talked about any of that past on your channel?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I went to school and I have a minor in vocal performance, and I sang barbershop. I used to sing in a couple bands, um, sang opera, but and not something I talk about much, but it's not like a secret.
Mhm. Well, there was a really cool in the moment kind of, I don't know if you want to call it exercise or tonal shaping, but the source audio being a voice,
Hmm.
which myself included, I feel like a lot of people think, well, this is your voice and that's kind of what you sound like and that's it. But there's, just like with an instrument or with microphones or anything musical, there are a lot of intricacies that you can kind of toy with to get different
Hmm.
output, including the human voice. So I think it would be pretty cool to kind of just give a little insight on that, because you went through this whole rundown of where you could throw your voice inside your own head, also like their stance, how that can affect your I think what the stance was more about was the range. Am I getting that right?
Like when I told him to bend his knees.
Mm-hmm.
So he was going for a real high note, and I told him to bend his knees, and all that does is kind of trick you into relaxing your neck, because it's really hard to tense your neck while you're bending your knees unless you're pooping. So,
So do vocal exercises on the toilet or not on the toilet?
not on the toilet.
Not on the toilet. Okay, I'll have to change my routine. That's where most of my vocal exercise happens.
Well, and a lot of mine, I mean, if there's a vocal pedagogy major out there, you probably would cringe at some of the things that I say, but so much of what happens in your head with your voice is like imaginary.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you can give somebody a picture or an illustration of what they should be doing, like, so many things happen mechanically under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that I can do really well, and maybe everybody can do this, I have no idea, but I can hear where somebody's resonance is really, really easily. So, like, I know if they're tense in their neck. I know if it's like at the bottom of their jaw. I can hear if it's up. Like, I just like, it's easy for me to picture, so that I can really quickly tell them, like, "Hey, are your shoulders tense?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Like, okay, we'll loosen those up. Like, bend your knees. Like, I can hear you breathing high. That one's an easy one, but all those little things, the hope is that you're adding it to, like, let's move things out of the way so that the resonance in the voice happens here rather than in your own head here.
Mm-hmm.
Because so many people think they sound good with the voice in their own head, but it's more about how are we projecting that to this thing in front of us so that it translates in a recorded context, which is really weird. Really weird.
It is weird, but it was very cool to hear the immediate and tangible difference with just a few body cues. Um, I kind of thought of it akin to more gym bro talk, but you're in the gym and you're trying to do a specific lift, and then
Yeah.
somebody that knows a little bit more than you comes and gives you cues. Yeah, give you
Mm-hmm.
certain body cues of, oh no, well imagine that you're like trying to pull your heel back here or something to
Mm-hmm.
activate this part. And it had never really, I never had vocal training, so I'm sure that this is something that a lot of you may know about already, or a lot of vocalists, have as a second nature thing. But I
Yeah.
on the surface, it's like obviously the way you hold your body is going to affect how you sound. I know about breathing in your diaphragm, and I know about chest versus head voice, but the more down and detailed intricacies are something that I hadn't really thought about
Mm-hmm.
before.
I think that's also a huge thing for engineers and producers. Like, really good producers know how to talk to vocalists like that,
Mm-hmm.
or know how to get at vocal sounds that they want. Um, Especially in a singing context. Like, the same thing with a guitar player. He's going to know exactly what to do with that guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if the sound's not right, like, oh, let's change the string gauge. Let's do something different with the preamp stack. Like, they just know.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's got their own, like, little talents. Like, my hope is to be dangerous enough to know what I want. Like, if the kick drum's too long, well, let me wedge a pillow against it,
Right.
or hang a sandbag off the floor tom so it's
Mm-hmm.
not as long. And same thing with the voice, you know, just knowing those little things that can hopefully save that day. As if you give people little wins, like they're gonna relax, and that's 90% of it right there.
Mm-hmm.
Like just giving him that one little tip, it may have worked, it may not have, but for him, it relaxed him, and he did the rest of the thing really well. Like,
yeah.
so it may not have been at all what I said directly, but it got him to a place to do something with his own body that worked.
Yeah.
So.
The Whisper Therapy Studios.
Yeah. Well, you're not wrong.
That's probably a whole other concept that we could dig into at another point. But I experience it as a music educator, and I would imagine you experience it as a studio owner and producer and engineer. But that whole psychological component of whoever you're working with, and how do you get the best out of the other person and give the best out of yourself in very varying contexts. But we don't have to get into that here. But I think it's an interesting idea that might not get thought about a whole lot if you're just going to studios.
For sure. And it's one of the biggest things that can affect your performance and the overall outcome. And it's not really something that is talked about a whole lot.
Yeah. And everybody has those days where your fingers just aren't doing what they're supposed to do. You know, your ears aren't working the way that you're used to for whatever the reason. But if you have somebody that, like you said, can give you the little wins and give you the, not even nudges in the right direction, but like laying the breadcrumbs out for you.
Yeah.
So like, no, I totally got here on my own. Yeah, bud. Yeah, you did, bud, didn't you?
It happens a lot.
Yeah.
It happens a lot.
But we all need that, man. We all need that. So, do you have any music that you've been into lately?
Oh, let me look.
Keep springing it on you.
Oh, I got one. Old record, Blue Merle. I don't know how popular these guys are, but Burning this record.
Burning
ever
the
listen to
Sun.
this?
I don't think so.
It's like the perfect mix of bluegrass and like pop and good times. I don't even know when this record was made, but like it's just a vibe. But there's like 3 seconds for you. I'm trying to see when that even came out. 'Cause I don't think they did a whole lot. 2005.
Okay.
But it's super good. Like the tones are great. The songs just flow into each other. It's like the tail end of when people made albums to be listened to front to back.
Yeah.
And there's like instruments tossed in there you feel like shouldn't be here. Like it's the most well executed mandolin on a pop record I've ever heard.
I like that.
It's wild. Blue Merle, check it out.
Blue Merle. My recommendation this week is yet again just another band of some friends, some good boys. Annapurna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man.
is.
They're based out of Louisville, and
He used to live up here though, didn't he?
he did, yeah.
Greg?
Yeah.
Was it Hajnaki?
Yes.
I don't know how to say it.
Hajaniki.
Hajnaki.
Greg Haneke.
Haneke. That makes way more sense.
Yeah.
Sorry, Greg.
And I could be saying it wrong. I have I don't know. I pronounce things wrong all the time. So
Greg, just let us know.
just
man.
good old Greg. No, great dude. Killer musician. His band Annapurna. One of my favorite tunes is Henna, which is one of their older releases. It really scratches the itch that I have of like that explosions in the sky, just college, stay up all night, do homework nostalgia, mixed with some of the more complex math rock type of ideas. And then everything is very, like you have really intricate, clean guitars, but then you have these long, flowy, lyrical segments that are happening too. And then boom, there's this really cool riff-driven instrumental that happens. So it's all the things that I like. So Annapurna, check them out. Anything else you want to cover in this one?
I don't think so.
I don't think.
I think we covered it.
We covered
put
a lot.
Blanket on it. We put it to bed. We read it a story.
Gave it a nice warm glass of milk.
Yeah. Soy milk. Almond milk.
Were you ever a milk before bed kid?
No. I'm lactose intolerant.
Oh, I'll tolerate you. I grew up drinking way too much milk, man. Like a gallon every couple days, kind of milk drinker.
That's why you're so stacked.
Maybe, I don't know. I was also a cereal baby. None of that natural milk, which probably explains a lot of what's wrong with me. So. Well, thanks for joining us again on Phantom Power Hour. If you haven't already, subscribe, hit the like button, ring that bell, check out the Recording Studio Loser channel for all the Styx stuff that we have been up to, as well as a bunch of other cool videos. Some definitely not legal advice, but cool legal area ideas. You can learn a thing or two. So, yeah.
Yeah. See you next time.
Bye.
Boop. Boop.